All righty, welcome back for another episode of Two Plane Sports. Today is Wednesday, January 4th, and we're back for another episode. Today we're going to be talking recruiting, which I know a lot of people really enjoy and want to know more about, and specifically the transfer portal. Obviously, that's hot and heavy right now. OU's having to hustle, get guys in for officials because you've got a short window, and these kids are going to have to make their announcements and decisions very quickly. And OU's got a few spots left, and they're looking to add a few more veteran guys that can provide some immediate contributions next season. So we're going to be talking about that. And then we're also going to be talking the All-American game, maybe a little more into the future talk of the Sooners team. I mean, with 10 All-Americans in total, that's a pretty strong class with 25 incoming freshmen, and 10 of them are All-Americans. That's pretty strong. So we're going to be talking about the Under Armour All-American game, the implications of that, and how everyone looked, and just summarize that. So before we get into it, just want to say we appreciate it. We're over 5,500 subscribers. If you're new here or if you've been here a few times, be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, turn the notification bell on, and follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Apple, and Spotify. Everything's linked in the description below. And if you're listening to us on Apple or Spotify, leave us a review. It helps us out a lot, and it continues to grow our channel, and everything's free. So do that. It takes a few seconds. All right, so let's talk transfer portal, because that seems to be on everyone's mind, and including mine. OU's recruiting some guys. They're in a good spot for some guys and looking to finish strong. The first guy we'll be talking about is Devon Sears Jr. He's currently leaving Texas State. He came into Texas State. He was a JUCO kid from Ellsworth Community College. Played 1 year in Ellsworth in Iowa. Had 15 tackles, a pair of sacks, 5.5 tackles for loss in 5 games, and forced a fumble. He transferred to Texas State, did not play in 2021. And then last season, he ended up playing in a handful of games, had a total of 15 tackles, 1 sack in his career at Texas State, and then entering the transfer portal. His size, he's 6'2", 290. So Jose, you and I were talking about it before we started, and it seemed like the size is what really jumps off, while the statistics don't really wow you per se from just a number standpoint. It seems like OU needs more interior guys, and he's hearing visits, and he's hearing from schools, and he's got a top 3 of Oklahoma, Tennessee, and Penn State. So not only does Oklahoma see something in him, other Power 5 programs does as well. And you need interior guys. What's your take on Sears? And while some people might not be totally impressed with the statistics, it seems like it'd be a solid addition.
Yeah, it would be exactly that. And someone that could come in and help depth wise at least, and be competition on the practice field throughout spring ball, summer, going into the actual football season. It's tough to really know how he's going to fit into the team now, because on the defensive line, we have Isaiah Coe coming back. I mean, you have Derek LeBlanc there, Gilliam, Halton, potentially Sears. But you don't really know how that unit is going to look in total, because of some of the departures that that they're gone, not going to be back next season with it, the transfer portal or graduating or whatever different situations there are. I think it's going to be interesting. I really think he would just be a depth piece at this point, maybe get in the 2 deep and be additional help if an injury were to happen, because they do happen all the time in football. And you never want to get caught in that situation where you only have 2 or 3 guys that you really rely on. You want to have as many people there as possible that you feel can play at any point in the season if they're asked to. Sears, like you said, it's not like it's just Oklahoma that is looking at him as a potential guy to bring in. And he would definitely be more of a long-term, could contribute in year 2 of his stay at whatever school he ends up picking. I think given his numbers from last season, and the fact that was his first full season playing at a higher level of football outside of JUCO, he'll probably need at least a year just to understand the defense, figure out where he fits, get used to the campus, all that jazz, and then contribute. What would that be, his redshirt junior year on the field? So
He's a redshirt sophomore, so next year will be
Okay,
redshirt junior.
so redshirt senior year where he could really contribute a little bit more, and he needs an opportunity. And I think the fact that you're in the play that Penn State is one of the teams that is also really interested, and he has mutual interest in, I think is one that could be competition for Oklahoma. Tennessee had a good stretch of defense last year, but wasn't amazing. Neither was Oklahoma, but Penn State has a pretty solid defense that usually produces pretty good defensive linemen. So would definitely be good to beat them out. Shows that Oklahoma and Todd Bates are moving in the right direction, regardless of how people feel because of his ranking. Could be someone that again contributes, maybe not immediately, but down the road. But I would agree if someone were to say Oklahoma needs immediate contributors, they definitely do, because the defensive line was not very great or consistent throughout the year.
And he has announced publicly on Twitter his top three that we're talking about: Oklahoma, Penn State, and Tennessee. He's also he's also publicly announced that he will be at Oklahoma today as this video is being released. So I don't know exactly what time he's getting in today, but I'd imagine it's sometime around lunchtime, or earlier in the morning, maybe around 10 o'clock. And typically official visits are little over 2 days. So, he's coming in on the 4th, which is a Wednesday, and then he's going to be there, to Thursday to Friday, and probably leave sometime Friday afternoon potentially. And the rules are, I believe, you have to be done with official visits by Sunday. So if he spends a full 2 days, a little over 2 days at Oklahoma as an official, which I assume he would, and he's going to Oklahoma first, I think you're going to see Oklahoma try to not let him leave, just like Jeffrey Johnson. Remember how Jeffrey Johnson came in? I think he had the intention to go take an official visit at USC, and after us, or maybe it was LSU, or maybe it was both those schools. I can't quite remember, but for whatever reason, Oklahoma was able to shut it down before he even left. And I think that's what they're going to try to do with Sears. And even if he does leave, and he still might, he might leave and not commit, he's not going to have much time to go visit one school, let alone two other schools. So this is playing in Oklahoma's favor. I could see him sneaking in one more official visit to either Tennessee or Penn State. I just don't see the time unless he just goes for like one day, like Tasili Akana was doing, just literally a one-day visit. I just don't see that there's enough time for him to hit all three schools. So naturally, Oklahoma's getting the first visit. You got to feel really good.
Yeah, you have to, and the follow the visits mantra that stands with high school recruiting is not the same, at least in this point in transfer portal recruiting, because these guys do have to have a decision made here in the next week and a half or so. School's about to start. Spring semester is right around the corner for these guys, and they need to enroll. They need to be enrolled in a school on a roster soon so that they can participate in spring ball and not get more behind than they already are as older players. So really, I think it's better to be the first visit rather than the last, especially with that official visits being done so quickly that you don't really have to worry about being the first or the last. You really just have to worry about once I have them on campus, can I just shut it down immediately? Can this coaching staff shut down that recruitment so that you don't have to worry about it? Once you see guys take a second visit, maybe it's a little bit more reason for concern, but still probably not a huge issue, because again, they do have very short time to make 2 or 3 visits at this point. So we'll see how it goes. I just don't think it's gonna, because of the reasons you pointed out, he's gonna be on campus for 2.5, maybe 3 days, that he'll have virtually no time to really go visit Tennessee or Penn State, where Oklahoma will probably be getting another defensive lineman by the end of the weekend.
Definitely. And, you look at the transfers, potentially Devon Sears, and then you look at Trace Ford, already committed. Jacob Lacey's already there. We're going to talk about another guy here in just a little bit, Rondo Bothrod. This defensive line is going to get a lot of immediate contributors, and that's positive. And obviously the coaching staff has identified that this is a weak part of the defense. And I think we all would agree that this is a weak part, and they're doing everything they can to address it immediately. So moving on to another guy that entered in the transfer portal recently, Matthew Lee from UCF. Coming out of high school, he was not an overly highly rated recruit. He was a 3-star, had offers from UCF, USF, Air Force, Army, Colgate, small schools. Comes out and he plays at UCF for a couple of years. Ended up playing pretty well, more of an interior guy, center, offensive guard type player. Coming out of school, he was 6'3", 285. Now he's 6'4", 295. So he's got the body type. And naturally, you think of Jeff Lebby, Dylan Gabriel, that UCF connection, that Matt Lee would be a potential target. What do you think about Matt Lee?
So he'd definitely be a good addition. Again, I think this guy would also be a depth piece, and he's more of an interior offensive lineman, so maybe competing for one of the guard positions. Matt Tower wasn't amazing this year, so that spot is definitely something to look at. And with Chris Murray leaving, I know Savion Byrd played well during the bowl game, but bowl games are a very small sample size, and if he can come in and compete with either one of those guys for the starting guard position, it would be important to push those guys that are already at Oklahoma to perform better, but would show that he would come in and probably impact this team a little sooner than some would expect on, as soon as if he were to transfer to Oklahoma. If that happens, we'll see, but he played center at UCF. He might be more of a conjure guy where he's a swing lineman where he'll kind of be put in the situation that he would be most beneficial in. So being the 2 deep for a guard spot and the center spot. Rame, I mean, it sucks, but he hasn't had, I don't believe he's played a full season healthy for Oklahoma. So you kind of have to put some sort of guardrails there as a coaching staff in case he does get hurt again, and hopefully he doesn't. But Matt Lee would be a good backup for an Andrew Rame, an experienced center who played well at a pretty good school. And I mean, they're transferring over to the Big 12 next season, so and we'll see how competitive they are and how their offensive line does without him.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, more depth, veteran leadership always is a good thing. He comes in, and I believe he'll end up having a couple years. He's actually, he'll have 1 year left, and maybe because of COVID, he might actually have 2 because he's a redshirt junior right now. And I'm just double checking because we were just talking about this before. We're ready for this COVID year eligibility to go away because it is tough to keep up with what year and how many years of eligibility these guys have left. He has
He'll
2.
have
Yeah.
2 years left.
Yeah. Class of 2019. He'll have 2 years left. Come in. Could he maybe be a depth piece and maybe contribute second year, or maybe contributes both years? I don't know. But at the end of the day, you have a guy that could be a plug and play if McCade Mettauer struggles. Maybe Savion Byrd doesn't separate himself. Or like you said, Andrew Rame, any injuries, I mean, can happen. I mean, we thought we were going to see Jacob Sexton play all the Cheez-It Bowl, and then within like the first few plays, he ended up getting hurt. And then Aaron Parks gets shifted into the starting role. So it's always good. And, this connection to UCF is paying off with Jeff Lebby and Dylan Gabriel. And I think he'd be a good addition for this offensive line. And I think they're going to try to take, whether it's him or someone else, they're going to try to take another offensive lineman, I would imagine. So, but moving on to probably the most exciting, I guess, statistically speaking, transfer target that is, along the defensive line is Ronald Bothrod from Wake Forest. He's been in college forever. It seems like he redshirted in 2018. Obviously, was a part of the COVID year. His last 2 years have been his best years. 2021, he ended up having a total of 63 tackles, 8 sacks, 2 forced fumbles. Last year, he had 30 total tackles, 6 sacks, 2 forced fumbles. So a guy in the last 2 seasons that has total 93 tackles and 14 sacks and 4 forced fumbles is a great contributor and someone that can contribute immediately and someone that Oklahoma needs. And he's 6'4", 265. He plays that edge position, and he is someone that him and Trace Ford come in and bring a lot of experience and a lot of toughness, and a guy that Brent Venables and Todd Bates and this Clemson related coaching staff has a lot of familiarity with, and from the ACC. What do you think about him and the potential addition of him?
Well, it puts Reggie and Ethan on notice. Your jobs aren't secure, even if you're coming back, and even though it was your first year in the system, they're looking for older transfer guys to come in and push you and potentially take your time away from being on the field. Which, if you're those guys, it's really time to show up and do better in the pass rushing aspect. Ethan Downs, I said it a few episodes ago, he was good when it came to getting in the backfield, but quarterbacks elude him easy, and you saw it in the Cheez It Bowl. I feel like he had a couple opportunities to get a sack, but he missed Jordan Travis, and I know Jordan is elusive, but he had the chance to get a sack, and he missed them. Bothroyd would definitely be a guy that would come in and I would assume at least be on a 2D. I know we have exciting players coming in Trace Ford, and the guy that probably a lot of fans want to be day one starter, and PJ Adebawore. PJ is physically imposing, but he's still pretty raw. And when it comes to technique, he's just really, really athletic. And as a high school athlete, you can pretty much dominate just by being really big and strong. And getting into college, you're going to need to be big, strong, and good at football. And not that he's not, but I don't know how much time he'll really get as a true freshman, especially with how we've seen this staff handle true freshmen last year being our only example right now. But it's not like we saw a lot of true freshmen out there, no matter how talented or excited we were about them. Like Jaron Kanik is always the example I go back to. We all thought he could come in and play day one. He didn't really get an opportunity, though. One time he did was against Nebraska when Deshaun White got hurt. And then he never really touched the field again for defensive snaps, just special teams. So really having a realistic expectation there, assuming that the staff does something pretty similar, PJ probably will not play a ton of minutes, maybe play on special teams just to avoid any redshirting, and play him occasionally defensive on some defensive snaps if games ever get out of hand and Oklahoma is winning by a lot. Or hopefully it's not the other way around, but in those cases, maybe he gets time there. I don't know how realistic it is if to get Rondell, but he would definitely be a guy that could impact this defensive line, looking at how it performed last year and the potential he has to continue to develop under this coaching staff, because Wake Forest defense wasn't amazing last year and he still produced pretty well. Assuming that the defense does progress in the right direction with these defensive line coaches, he should do well enough that it's impacting the overall performance of the team as a whole in the win-loss column.
And you bring up, what are the odds of Oklahoma landing him? And he's going to be in Norman on January 5th, which is Thursday. So he's coming in for an official on Thursday. Like we talked about with Devon Sears, these are a little over 2-day visits, 2.5 days, somewhere in there. You come in on the 5th, in the morning of the 5th, which is Thursday. He would not leave till Saturday, probably after lunch. And you've got your visits that shut down on Sunday. Now, I don't know if he's been anywhere else. Could he take a 1-day visit? Of course he could. But I think this is another thing that you're going to see Oklahoma put the full court press on and try to not let him leave. And if you're coming in on Thursday and you're going to spend take the full visit, I like Oklahoma's shot there just because of the crunch on time. And you bring up Reggie Grimes and, Ethan Downs. I think we were talking about it in our live stream before the Cheez It Bowl. People were asking about the depth along the defensive line or who our starters are, the 2 deep or something like that. And I did think that Reggie Grimes at the time would be a defensive end. But, the more I've read, the more I've thought, and the way that the staff's recruiting the defensive end position, there's a chance that Reggie Grimes, he has the body type to be shifted more into the interior. And, right now he's 6'4", like 275. And an off season where he could put on probably 10, 15 pounds and get him closer to 285, 290, he would have the body type to play in the interior defensive line and maybe be a flex that can go out and rush the edge when he needs to in certain packages. I could see Reggie Grimes being shifted more into the interior because Oklahoma, at the end of the day, they need interior defensive linemen because you're only bringing in Jacob Lacey, and then if you do get Devon Sears, there's two guys coming in. You kind of need another body to be able to play on the interior defensive line to be able to rotate these guys. And naturally, Ethan Downs is good enough and young and kind of still raw that he can still get better at the defensive end. Reggie Grimes just feels like he kind of belongs on the interior. What do you think about that?
Definitely a possibility. I think right now with this defensive staff, what the staff is doing, mainly Todd Bates, is trying to put a bandage on something with some quick fixes, potential quick fixes with the transfer portal, and he'll have to hit the ground running hard in the 2024 recruiting cycle because I mean everyone knows that we had some pretty big miss in not getting David Hicks on board and getting that to actually come to fruition. We were talking about it before we started recording, and we'll talk about it more in depth when we get to talk more about the Under Armour All American game. But Peter Woods is a guy that had Oklahoma in his top four, and for whatever reason, he never visited Norman. I'm not really sure if the staff told him that they weren't interested, even though they were recruiting him pretty hard to Clemson, and that's where he is now, or if something changed where after he, announced his top four, he got that Jackson State offer and Deion Sanders made his way onto pushing Oklahoma off that list. Not really sure what the situation was, but missing on some defensive linemen and big time defensive linemen in the 23 class. They need to patch up with temporary fixes before, and then again before they can get some long-term solutions in this next recruiting class.
Definitely. I mean, at the end of the day, when a new staff comes in, you have to throw some band-aids on some things, at least temporarily. And I know that the transfer portal is not ideal in what Venables wants to do, but you have to adapt. And I don't see this down the line being where Oklahoma's going to sign 25 freshmen and then take 7 to 8, 7 to 9, maybe even 10 transfers in a single cycle. I mean, this is a complete overhaul of a roster that they're trying to do within, in a very expedited fashion, because at Oklahoma, you need to win now. So I would like to think that if he does make his trip to Norman on the 5th on Thursday, assuming I'm not sure if he's visiting elsewhere, assuming he makes that visit and he spends the full time, I think we might see him announce Rothberg that he's committed to Oklahoma. And especially if he doesn't take another visit after Oklahoma and maybe he's not publicly announcing it quite, immediately, I feel like Oklahoma would be right in position and to be the suitor. And apparently Auburn and Notre Dame and USC have been involved. Honestly, not really scared of USC at all. I mean, obviously, if you watch the Cotton Bowl in any USC game, not really worried. Auburn, I think a guy like him is not looking for a kind of dysfunctional program and kind of a train wreck of a program. And Notre Dame, I think, in my opinion, is the most legitimate threat just based off of, the reputation, stability. Marcus Freeman's a good recruiter. So if he makes a visit to Notre Dame, I would not be shocked if he does, but hopefully he doesn't. And hopefully he ends up committing to Oklahoma. I guess we will find out this weekend one way or another. And if he shows up, I feel pretty good.
And you talked about like the overhaul of the roster where sometimes you do have to just put bandages on certain problem areas. I think just thinking about a world if college football never changes or doesn't change for the next 10 years in regards to like regulations with NIL and transfer portal, both of those things are still pretty new. I think kids are taking big risks when they get in the transfer portal, and as they see it not work out for some, it won't work out for more and more people. they'll probably avoid the transfer portal or try to avoid it and only really utilize it if they feel it's absolutely necessary. And NIL, I mean, it's brand new. Eventually, that stuff where kids are hitting the transfer portal merely for NIL purposes is probably going to also tamper down because either regulations are going to come into place, and if that doesn't happen, you'll see situations like Jordan Addison where he got the bag, but it didn't really elevate his draft stock any more than it already was prior to being at Southern Cal. Or, I'm sure there's other situations. That's just the first one that popped into mind. I don't really think Jordan Addison went from being a second round wide receiver to a top 10 pick. He probably just stayed in that early day two, late day one, depending on what team ends up picking him.
I do agree. I think as time goes on over the next 3, 4, 5 years, we're going to see a shift in NIL and the transfer portal, and maybe more rules and regulations come with that. But I see in my mind what the transfer portal is and what it should be, what I would hope it to be, is one, if your coach leaves, and they're going to hire someone that you don't really know, and you'd rather go pick your coach. I don't blame you. I wouldn't blame you to go find another coach. And it's just like in the NFL, if you're there and a new coaching staff comes in and they might cut you, you might as well go find another coaching staff that really likes you because you're not their guy. The other one is like a Devon Sears or like a Rondo Bothroyd, where you are good and you get the opportunity to move up to the next level of college football or college athletics. Rather than playing at a small school all your life, if you're really good and you're really at the top, why not go get another year or two being developed at a better program, a bigger program, and have more exposure and more NIL opportunities? That, in my mind, is what the transfer portal is for. And obviously, there's special circumstances where family comes up or various other things, and maybe it is just there is too much depth in front of you. But I think, in my mind, those are the two main reasons and special circumstances where the transfer portal and NIL can be really good and give kids more opportunities.
Agreed. And it would also prevent some of this stuff where it also forces the coaches like Jimbo Fisher to not overly recruit one position and then have guys leave a year and a half later. He just had a 2022 5-star enter the transfer portal. Like, that guy probably didn't get much of an experience at College Station. He was there for a year, maybe, if he was an early enrollee. Like,
Yeah.
both the team and the player has to give more of a chance, they've got to give it a better look at, how good am I fit here and how good is this player going to be a fit.
And you only get one shot at it. If you transfer after your true freshman year or you redshirt your freshman year, you better pick the right school because you're going to be there for another 3 to 4 years.
And you
And
better
you
have a
only get one
coach that
shot.
you better have a if you end up transferring a second time, you better be really cool with the coach, or he just lets you play and not have to sit out that 1 year. Because if it's Lincoln Riley, he'll make you sit out as long as you can.
Yeah, definitely. So, do you have any more thoughts on transfer portal or anything like that?
Nah, it'll be
No.
interesting, but it's coming up so fast and spring semester's coming up so fast. We're gonna know answers to all of these recruitments very quickly. It won't be a long Peyton Bowen like
Peyton Bowen.
saga.
Definitely, definitely. So I do think that Oklahoma still tries to land a wide receiver. I don't really know who yet, but I am curious to see if over the next week, maybe even by Friday's video, we can figure out maybe who's going to be the wide receiver that they're going to get. Maybe a John Paul Richardson from Oklahoma State. I don't know.
We'll see.
So yeah, we'll see. So moving on to the Under Armour All-American game and talking about the Army All-American game. OU, out of their 25 incoming freshmen, they have 10 All-Americans, which I believe, and someone can fact check me, but I think I heard this. This is the most All-Americans that Oklahoma has signed in a single recruiting class, which is obviously very impressive considering some of the recent recruiting efforts from Lincoln Riley, in top 10 classes that we have had. Having 10 of these guys that are, 8 of them being in the Under Armour and 2 of them being in the Army All-American game, that's great. And as we're recording this, which is Tuesday, the Under Armour All-American game was played a little bit earlier this afternoon. And Jackson Arnold, he's the best quarterback in this class. And I know, Arch Manning and everything else. Jackson Arnold is the real deal. I'm not saying he's going to come in and start day one because most freshman quarterback don't. I mean, not even Caleb Williams did. He looks ready. I mean, he's going to need a year. If he can get a full year red shirt, he's going to be ready to start redshirt freshman year. And he might get some playing time this upcoming season. I don't know. Caden Green looked like a man amongst boys at times. I mean, 6'4", like 310, 315. He is a massive human being, and he's like the most, I guess, filled out in all the right places for, comparing it to other incoming freshman tackles. I mean, he's huge. And then you've got Lewis Carter looked good. Jacoby Johnson made some plays. Oklahoma players were all over the field. What do you think?
Yeah, I watched the entire second half, which was probably the most boring part of football ever, or game of football ever played, because no points were scored. I guess I stopped watching in the last 3 minutes because there was no points being scored. But Jackson did look like the best quarterback on that field. I mean, that he's the reason that they got any points on team speed. When he led a touchdown drive in the final minutes of the first half. Lewis Carter, I think, was out of the Oklahoma commits that were there on the defensive side of the ball, was the best one. What Brandon Drum said when he was on the show, I think he proved it. Lewis showed it on the field today against some really high level competition. He could get some playing time next year if he, learns the playbook, because that is something that is important to this coaching staff. If he has good enough knowledge of the playbook, his instincts will put him in the right place to make plays. One thing that I think this game should show fans that get maybe a little bit too excited about recruiting and recruits as individuals is these guys, for the most part, were playing against 5-star players, high 4-star players, and the score, I'm going to double check myself, but it was 14-7, and there were a lot of mistakes made. And I know they only get a few days to practice, but I mean, the competition is now higher. They played one weekend with higher competition, and a lot of mistakes get made. It happens with freshmen. The speed of the game gets that much faster just playing against higher level recruits. You're not just playing alongside. You're not a 5-star player playing against kids that might not compete or shouldn't be on the same field as you sometimes. They looked a little bit more normal. You didn't see guys, running backs, go for crazy amount of yards, and freaking Team Phantom just kept throwing it to Zachariah Branch and on bubble screens and hoping that he made a play. I don't think the dude had over 50 yards. It's the game. The name of I guess this All-Star game is just try to get them in a position to try to make a play and use their best skill and Zachariah's speed. But the best player on that field to me was Peter Woods, and that's why I brought him up earlier as a miss for Oklahoma. They should have Todd Bates, the defensive staff, should have tried to recruit him harder. I don't really recall what the situation was. I just remember we talked about him when he first put out his top 4, and it was kind of like the Derek Williams kid that ended up committing to Texas. We came into their top schools kind of out of nowhere, and then they went away. I'm not sure if Oklahoma said no or if the kids were just doing it to try to put on another big logo on those edits. But Peter Woods went down to a top 4. I think Derek Williams went down to a top 8. So being top 4 is pretty relevant. And then when it came down to right before he made his decision, Oklahoma was no longer in that top 4, and it was Jackson State. Again, I'm not sure if Primetime did something to scoot in and take Oklahoma out of the race, but if you're Todd Bates, you had an existing relationship with this kid. You recruited him heavy to go to Clemson. He ended up committing to Clemson. You probably had a much better shot than maybe they believed. Again, don't remember exactly what happened to that recruitment, but Peter Woods was involved in every single defensive play. It seemed like every single defensive play that his team made. He was actually the reason that Jackson Arnold threw a pick. He went up and batted the ball. It became tip drill, and one of the DBs caught it. He put a lot of pressure on Jackson Arnold and Jaden Rashada. I mean, it was impressive, and he's going to be a problem. I think Peter Woods is going to be a guy that in 3 years we will see going in the top 10 of the NFL draft.
I bet you're right, because I was also seeing other people talk about that on Twitter, like talking about, geez, we missed out on Peter Woods, and he might even be better than David Hicks, even though that the stats and I guess the rankings don't show that, but he
Oh
is
yeah,
just is that good.
he looked better than David Hicks. They were lining up next to each other, and you really only saw Hicks because he was celebrating with Peter Woods after he made a play.
Yeah. So, and you bring up a good point. I mean, they are playing their equal competition now, and even that competition is still a step below where these kids are going to go play college ball at. I mean, 4 and 5 star high school games are still a step below, and it's going to take time. And PJ Adebawore looked good. I don't see him coming in and immediately contributing. And honestly, like you brought up that he could contribute on on special teams, I would love to redshirt him. Give him a whole year. Like, let's get him as a redshirt freshman. Let him play in the 2024 season. But maybe he comes in. You know, there's always a few that come in and really shine. And Lewis Carter, you're right. Brandon Drum pointed him out. I don't see him coming in and playing a whole lot. Maybe a special team guy, or maybe he can redshirt. But just thinking about the future of the linebacker position, it's the depth's getting better. You look at Jaron Canick, Deshaun McCullough, Lewis Carter. I mean, Samuel Omosigo. It's getting better, but it's not going to be better. Probably game one of it's going to be better, but it's not going to be where it's going to be maybe come 2024. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. Like, we're going to see an improvement, but really where you're going to see this 24 and 25, where it's going to be like, okay, we've got elite linebacker play.
Yeah, I agree. And another All-American that I think is kind of interesting is Jacoby Johnson. So he was interviewed by, I believe it was Rivals earlier in the week during the practices for the All-American game. And he mentioned how the coaches told him he'll more than likely play safety, which I think was something either you or Brandon brought up in the Florida State game, or before the Florida State game when we did our preview. And I kind of dismissed it because he's a really good corner and a really good athlete overall. I guess from what he said in the interview, the coaches really originally told him safety, which he would be good at. I mean, he's fast. He's kind of like Billy Bowman, where he's just an elite athlete and the speed makes sense back there. I guess Jay Valai reached out somewhat recently, and told him to stay ready to play corner. And I guess he might get some opportunities to play wide receiver, because apparently he hasn't picked a number yet, but the idea is that he needs to pick a number that would fit both wide receiver and DB, so that if they need to move him to the offense, he's jersey ready. Who knows if he'll be playbook ready, but like, this dude is that good of an athlete where that's an actual possibility in college. And with this staff, that's not a common thing. Like, you don't see them, you don't hear other guys that played, because most of these guys played on both sides of the ball in high school. But you don't see them just saying, telling Omosigo that he played wide receiver at the high school level and was pretty good at it. You're not hearing him say, yeah, coaches are telling me to stay ready to play offense. Like, Jacoby is that athletic that they're at least thinking about giving him that chance.
Now, that's a good point that you brought up. And Brandon, he did record some, go to Mustang games, and he raved about Jacoby Johnson. I mean, since we started talking about him over a year ago, and Brandon Drum also says, that we're talking about Brandon Martin, but then now Brandon Drum also has said that he believes that he's the most athletic, gifted defensive back in this 23 class. I remember seeing him and hearing him say that, and the staff obviously agrees with him. And I do think that they're going to get, even Makari Vickers, they're going to get runs at, at safety, open competition at corner. I mean, they're going to let these kids duke it out, and the best player is going to play. Whether you're a true freshman or whether you're a redshirt senior, I think they're going to let these kids really have an open competition in the defensive backfield, because obviously how many yards they gave up against Florida State is not sustainable long term, and they're going to address this as fast as possible. So overall, I mean, if you're Coach Venables and the staff, you got to love seeing all these Oklahoma Sooners play in these All-American games. It's strong. It's for such a disappointing, and I guess so many misses in this 2022 class. This class is really good, and we got to remember that.
It's an ESPN top 5 class, number 4, if I remember correctly.
Yep.
So, I mean, I know at 247 has us at number 5,
six overall, composite 5 if you don't do the transfers, so 5 or 6.
And you kind of just got to pick the one that you like the most, and we can we'll just go with top 5. Thanks to ESPN.
Yeah, oh, definitely. So overall, pretty good. We're gonna have some answers on some transfers soon. Do you have any final thoughts, or do you want to do the individual challenge?
In the video challenge, you know what? I didn't want to bring it up because it's kind of a nasty situation, but the Bills player that had that medical situation on the field, don't want to talk about it too much. But if you can, and have some extra money, or if you want to feel it, you don't want to spend on Starbucks tomorrow, go donate to his toy drive. Think that I saw earlier they have raised over like 3.5 million since the incident yesterday. Like, it's gone viral. So if you want to help out in any way, do that if you can.
Yeah, actually, as we're recording this, Jose, it is now $5.6 million.
Yeah, do that. Donate $3. I believe that was his number. So $3.
Yeah.
Nothing crazy. Just help out, help him with what he was passionate about, and hopefully he pulls through.
Yeah, no kidding. I certainly hope so. And I was sick to my stomach watching that, and definitely thinking about him through this. So I certainly hope he pulls through. And it's just a nasty situation. So, all right. Well, you made it this far. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, turn the notification bell on, follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Apple, and Spotify. Everything's linked in the description below. And we will be back on Friday for another episode, maybe some more recruiting talk. If anyone's interested in that, I'm sure some people will be. We'll catch you guys next time.